Greetings, fellow insomniacs, and welcome to another episode of the Creature Features podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. I am, of course, your host, your friend in fright. My name is Chunky Larry, and this time around, we're going to be doing something that I'm really excited about doing. We're going to be talking about something that is kind of polarizing in the world of Halloween fandom and lore. And it's rare that you get to, as a horror fan, have a conversation with somebody who's responsible for something that is as polarizing as this is. He is an amazing writer, director. He is actually responsible for the Crystal Lake Memories documentary, as well as the Nightmare on Elm Street documentary, that massive fucking thing. And we're going to get to talk to him today, but we're going to be zeroing in on one specific subject. I'm, of course, talking about Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, or Halloween 666, or Halloween 666, The Origin of Michael Myers. We're going to find out all about it because, ladies and gentlemen, I have with me today Daniel Farrands. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I am so fucking pleased. And I'm sure that you get this a lot. But Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, was the first Halloween movie I got to see in the theaters. And it is one of those films that, for me, it's complicating because I love it and I hear so much hate about it. And I know that you have a very complex relationship with this film, and I want to kind of explore that. So before we get into any of that, though, I just wanted to preface this with letting you know that this is one of my favorite of the Halloween sequels, and it is one of my favorite partially due to the nostalgia of it being my first theater experience, but also in the sense that it has such a story behind it. And I think that a lot of the sequels don't necessarily have that, as well as being this weird kind of juxtaposition point within the franchise and where the franchise begins to move from this point on. And so I guess my first question is, what were your earliest memories of Halloween? Because there's certain things that I just want to bring up and I think will be very interesting.
Nice to be here, and thank you for the introduction, I think. My earliest memories of Halloween, you were talking about the original movie?
Just the franchise in general.
Well, I am, old enough, I have to admit, to, remember when the original Halloween was playing in theaters. I didn't get to see it at that time. I was too young. Probably not too young, but I certainly was not in a family that would have allowed such a thing. So I heard about the film, but I didn't see it. I remember there was honestly, it's kind of funny, but I think we had a babysitter of all things who was telling us the plot of this scary movie she had seen. And I just remember her telling me the ending, and I kind of was then she looks over and he's gone. So there was, I knew that, and so I didn't actually get to see the movie until it premiered in '81 on network television. It was like the NBC movie of the week. So
and that was the John Carpenter where he added the footage in.
Correct.
Because that was okay. So that's one of the things that I loved so much about Curse of Michael Myers is that the man in black is Dr. Wynn, because that's
Right.
a throwaway line in the TV version of the movie where the lady calls off and she says, Dr. Wynn is waiting to see you, doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah, yes, dude.
How we even knew his name.
So, for me, like, as a fan of this fucking franchise, those little moments it's like, oh no, this one's special. This one is by one of us. And so I just like, that is the thing that, like, really kind of like grabs me. And you are a fan of the franchise.
Huge. I mean, when I say huge, I don't know how to even, I don't want to overestimate it, but I kind of can't overestimate my love and passion for the series, especially as I was growing up. So as I had mentioned, I'd seen it on that Friday night, movie of the week NBC premiere, and with those extra scenes and some of the cut moments, what have you. So to me, that was the movie. I didn't realize until later, when I got really into it, that wasn't the actual film. Like, those scenes didn't exist. So when I finally saw the real cut of it, I was a little like, well, wait a minute, where's the scene where he's just addressing the board at Smith's Grove and goes to, like, all of those little moments. And how come Linda's not visiting Laurie with a towel on her head? So anyhow, so I was a little bit like confused, I guess. But yeah, so I had seen the film that night, and my biggest memory of that was being with the family, gathering around the television, and one by one, people leaving because they were too scared to watch the rest, and leaving me. I was left alone, like in the living room in the dark, with pillows piled around me so I could hide. And I was just, it's like, I think when she's crossing the street, to the house, to the Wallace, like that, everybody just abandoned me. So that last, 15 minutes.
I mean, obviously, that's that crescendo moment,
of course,
where it's just
when it all builds,
pure nightmare fuel.
Right. And so all of
the
intensity of the movie, I experienced all by myself when I was 11 or 12. So that was a little much for my brain, but it was funny because we had this thing in our living room at the time, which very few people had one, called a VCR. And I just decided that night, I don't know why, I think it was just the fun of being able to record things off television, because before then, around that time, you couldn't do that. So I was doing that. And so I had suddenly this VHS tape of the film that had aired. And I just remember, I don't know if I was telling my sister or somebody, you got to see the rest of it. You got to see the rest of it. like I was so terrified, but at the same time, so like, it's that adrenaline rush. Like, it's like when you get off the roller coaster. Just that
absolutely.
Kind of vibe.
So for me, I had a very similar thing where after I had saw Nightmare on Elm Street for the very first time, I started drawing like concepts of the Freddy glove, and I would just show like these crude drawings of what was the most terrifying thing in the world to me to anybody that would be willing to look at it. And I have to assume that's kind of where your love of telling stories comes from, is being like, no, you got to see this.
Yeah. I mean, I think it happened earlier with, Star Wars. I mean, because I was a Star Wars kid in the 70s. So,
I mean, that lines up.
That was probably the one that, in the biggest possible way, probably like fueled my imagination. So I would say definitely pre-Halloween, I was a Star Wars geek. In fact, I remember I even directed a Star Wars play in the 4th grade. So,
dude, that's awesome.
So I was already doing, taking these things that inspired me so much and kind of putting my spin on them.
And you saying that you did a Star Wars play in the 4th grade, that's initiative. That's the initiative that it takes to reach out to a Mustafa Akkad and
that's
just be like, hey, here's some of my writing.
Yeah.
Like
Like well, I didn't use that one as an example.
How old were you when you did that?
I get what you're saying. But yeah, no, I think the storytelling was always there. I mean, I was that kid, was always trying to recruit other kids for, little home movies and neighborhood plays. Before that, we were all obsessed. I mean, I'm really dating myself here, dude. Like we were obsessed with Jesus Christ Superstar. So we would have these like backyard
great movie.
and we would act it out. I mean, every kid acts out something, but for me, it was really important. Like we had to get the details of the movie exactly right. So
who was your character
in Jesus Christ Superstar?
Yeah,
I think we played everyone, but
like, but the one that you were like, "This is me." It was Pontius Pilate, wasn't it? I'm sure I had to
play Jesus, so you know.
Yeah, everybody wants to play Jesus, right?
And Judas was another great role, so maybe I could that one on a few times. I don't think I could hit those notes, but anyway, but I don't know how we did it. You know, that was our thing.
Yeah, and that's so again, I think that's a lot of like horror fans. We try to replicate that feeling, and it's like wanting.
I'm sorry, I don't have that story where I was a kid, you know, watching like Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I don't have that.
No, for me, everybody gets.
I'm not kidding. It was Halloween, like that. That was my thing. It was my jam.
Yeah, and so I had mentioned it, but you sent a script to Mustafa Akkad, and based on that script, you get a meeting with him. How old were you when that happened?
So I sent a letter initially to his office. So rewinding a little bit, I mean, I moved to Los Angeles right out of high school, and my goal was I'm going to make Halloween movies or Friday the 13th. I was open, but I was going to do one of those. Don't know how I was going to do it, but I had it in my mind. That's the plan. So made my way to Los Angeles. Grew up, you know, partially I grew up in a little town in Northern California called Santa Rosa. So I just loaded up my car after high school, and you know, maybe probably for a few weeks later, and just made my way down to Southern California. And you do everything you got to do to survive, you know. And I was literally not even 18. I was still, you know, on the verge of 18. So really young. You do whatever jobs you have to just, you know, pay the rent. And so while I was doing those jobs, I was writing, and I had been writing for a while, even as a kid, but probably more specifically since like junior high. And the thing that really lit the fire, I have to say, this is just not answering your question directly, but it kind of all plays into it, is I was also, you know, at that time we were getting more Friday the 13th films than we were getting Halloween films. So, you know, my attention was shifted by sheer necessity, I guess, because that's what we had when, you know, Friday the 13th, 2, 3, 4, you know, we're getting them all. And, you know, sequentially every year, a year or two. So anyway, but yeah, Friday the 13th became a real like passionate thing for me as well. So one Christmas break, I think it was, I sat down and I typed out a letter, you know, in the days we used these things called typewriters, a letter to a man named Frank Mancuso Jr., and he was the producer. At least that's what it said on the credits. So I took it as the way that worked. I didn't really know what a producer did, but I wrote him a letter. I don't know how I found his address, but I did. You know, this is way pre-internet, so we couldn't Google people. That didn't exist. So I think I got, I don't know, something. I had to look him up. So I found an address, sent that letter, and lo and behold, a couple weeks later, there's an envelope in the mailbox that says, on the return address, says Friday 4 Incorporated. And I open it, and it's this like brilliant letter from, you know, this man who, you know, to me is like a superstar. Like if your name's on a movie, you're famous and all of that. So he wrote to me in the nicest way and said, in fact, I still have his letter like framed. So, you know, it's in my office, always has been since. And it was just the most encouraging, positive, kindest letter, rejection letter, but a letter nonetheless, you know, acknowledging me, saying, you know, the letter you wrote is better than the half of the correspondence I get from people 20 years your senior. You know, please don't give up on this. This is for you. This business welcomes you. So I think
that's amazing.
It was that gave me that little boost of confidence to say, you know what, I can do it. Frank Mancuso said I can do it. So so I really kind of like, that letter was in my back pocket, like for the rest of my, you know, school years. I didn't have the money to go to film school or anything like that. So, you know, for me, it was just doing the odd jobs and writing scripts and trying to make connections. So that's really how I did it. So I know I'm giving you like the real roundabout story here about how this all happened, but it's really kind of it all leads into the letter to Mr. Akkad's office. It didn't get to him directly. It got to a guy named, very nice man named Ramsey Thomas, who had been the producer of Halloween 5. And to give you a little context there, I had seen Halloween 5. This is going back to 1989, and I think I'd been in Los Angeles for about a year, maybe a year and a half when that came out. And I remember going to see that film with two friends of mine who I'm still friends with, and they would vouch for me. We left the theater, and I said to them in the lobby of the theater, I am going to write Halloween 6. Like, I declared this to them and to the universe and to my little brain that this is going to be my reality. So, and you know, they say these things like how you
Frank
manifest
Mancuso
things.
Jr. had already given you the
my other thing is, you know, be careful what you wish for. But but that being said,
yeah. So
I sent a letter in, sort of the way I did with, you know, Mr. Mancuso years earlier. That, you know, I just kind of said who I was, and I'm a huge fan. I don't know what I said in the letter that convinced him to give me a call, but Ramsey Thomas gave me a call, and he's like, it was very kind of short. Like, for him, it was just like another call he was making during his day. Like, he was just treating me like, I don't know, almost like a writer that is part of the business, and this is just how everything works. You know, you set up a pitch meeting, you know, so I was like another call he was making. And he's like, great, you know, send me a script, and we'll set a meeting. And yeah, so anyway, I sent him a script, which was not a Halloween script. I have to emphasize, it was an original horror script I had written. In fact, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think the script I sent him was, it was called Sleepy Hollow, and it was about kids in modern day Sleepy Hollow having to face off against the Headless Horseman. So that was the script that I'd sent. And because it was a Halloween vibe, you know, it had that sort of classic Americana, and the kids were kind of contemporary. There was something about that script he responded to. By the way, I ended up selling that script to TriStar like about a year after that. So that was really exciting. That was my very first script sale. Anyway, so yeah, I got the call from Ramsey. He's like, Mustafa Akkad, and he's saying all these names that I've only ever, you know, kind of seen in a movie screen before. And he calls me in. I was 19 years old, so at that time. So I went in, and I spent, I don't know, 2 weeks before the meeting, like feverishly putting together this book, of just because I knew, like, I don't have any real credits. I don't have any like credibility walking into this meeting. So I need to really impress this man with my knowledge. So with that, I created this. I think fans have sort of taken on this term of like the Bible of Halloween at that time. I mean, it was kind of a synopsis of like everything that had come before, everything that, all the little, you know, Easter eggs that were dropped in the series, and all the family tree of the thing. And then there was that weird symbol on the mysterious stranger in the last movie. And, you know, I went to a place in Los Angeles called the Bodhi Tree, which is no longer around, but it was like this kind of new age bookstore. And I had drawn it on a piece of paper because I had no idea what this thing was. And the person who worked there said, oh, I think that's a rune. Let me show you some books. And so he took me to this book section with, you know, archaic knowledge. And it was a book called Rune Magic by Donald Tyson. I will never forget that book, because that became my kind of, I relied on that for this mythology that was, you know, built up around what they had sort of said was some connection to Michael Myers in 5, you know, building this myth. So anyway, I had all this information. I went in, met Mustafa. I was nervous. I'm sure I was sweating. I think he was amused when I walked in the door. There's this kid that's walking in. This is not like a 30, 35, 40-year-old writer. This is a 20-year-old kid. And I think he was just kind of like with his pipe, but in his warm kind of jovial way, he was very kind to me, but I think he was kind of like, there must be some mistake here because you're a child. But anyway, the meeting happened, and, you know, I walked out, and then I didn't hear a thing for 5 years. 5 years. So I would occasionally check in, sort of wanting to know what was going on, if there's, you know, if they were going to make this film. But during that time, they ran into a big rights issue, like a big legal fight for the rights between the Akkad side and like John Carpenter's side, and it just ended up being. And then I think there were other like Irwin Yablans, people who were all partners in the original, three films. And I think they were all vying for the rights. And anyway, it all turned into a big legal mess for a long, long time. So, I knew they weren't moving forward with the movie with 6, but then I read in Daily Variety that they had licensed or partnered with this new company called Miramax, that they were going to produce the film or finance the film, and Akkad was involved, and it was just kind of a general announcement about it, and I was like, well, that's that. That's not happening for me. So much for manifesting. But I, kind of at that time, been so many years, I just wasn't putting a whole lot of like thought into it. And then one day I got a call, and it was Mustafa's office, and he's like, he'd like you to come in and talk to him about Halloween 6. And I did. A little confused because, at that point I thought this movie was like a go, like that they had all the pieces put together and they were going to
Why would they announce it without a script, right?
Right. Exactly. So I went in and they were, it was, I remember it vividly. It was Mr. Akkad. It was his son Malik, who now is like, the godfather of the series, and now that after his father tragically passed. So he's taken on that mantle. But anyway, it was him, and Malik and I were like around the same age. So now I'm about 24. So young kids still. And a man named Paul Freeman, who I just recognized his name because he had produced Halloween 4. So it was them in a room in Mustafa's Century City office in a tower, and it was I was intimidated, to say the least, to like just sort of being the center of attention in this meeting, and like, what are they going to ask? And I just kind of got, I got the speech, which was like, listen, we have a go movie, we have the financing for the movie, we have no script. We've gone through 6 different writers and 10 different drafts, and nobody is cracking this. And I remembered you because of that book you left. And he's like, and here it is, because it's been sitting here on my desk since I met you the first time. And we've kind of used your book as kind of like the holy grail, the Bible, if you will, of all things Halloween. You put it together for us in a way that was like, thanks. You gave us a whole rundown of our series. So that, he's like, we've kind of relied on your take. So he's like, well, I wanted to give you the chance to come in and pitch me something that maybe you have the right idea. So that's where they all began.
And so
that's a lot of it. That's a lot of information. To me, so anyway, but that's the setup.
And all of that information is absolutely paramount to what happens after this particular meeting, because there's 3 versions of this story. There's your version of the story, there's the theatrical version of the story, and then there's the producer's cut of the story. And the point of getting to that point, from what you came up with to what we've seen in the theaters to the thing that diehards were pining for years, is a really interesting story, because you had mentioned that Paul Freeman was brought in to produce this film, and it's directed by Joe Chappelle, who had only done like one movie before this.
One movie. And by the way,
he's relatively.
Joe wasn't on the project when I was hired. I was the only one that was. In fact, when I was early on in the process, when I was working just in the writing process of the whole thing, I was being told that they were pretty close to closing a deal with a guy named Fred Walton, who was the director of When a Stranger Calls, one of my favorite scary movies, that was very much of the period of the original Halloween. So I was excited about that. I thought, oh, cool, we're going to make a movie that's suspense driven. It's not going to be about creative kills like the Jason films, which, I love, but I just didn't want to make that. I think Mike Myers was different, or should be different.
It did start to veer in that territory with 5, though. I mean, the pitchfork kill, and
well, I mean, it had done that even in 2. I mean, it was, syringes, and I think you were trying to like capture the audience that had kind of been like me, you know, as a kid, like you, I had seen all of these Friday the 13th films and all the other imitators, Happy Birthday to Me, and, you know, just go down the list, Prom Night.
Oh yeah.
You know, where the killings became bigger than life, you know, like that became the centerpiece. For me, I was like, I was less interested in that than I was in telling a story that was closer in tone to the first film, where it was more suggestion. You know, I think tension. The first film I can liken more to Psycho than, you know, a Friday the 13th. It's not a gore-laden movie. So for me, I was always coming at it from that approach, and I just never in my mind like thought, oh, let's do like exploding heads on fuse boxes. Like it just like it didn't. That was not in my plan.
So the one character that this is the way that I want to try to weave this is. I want to get as much of what your idea for Halloween 6 was, just for people that don't know. And so, obviously, one of the big things that needs to be addressed when you come into 6 is the ending of Part 5.
Right. That was absolutely the number one thing I was told. This was a direct order from Mr. Akkad was... We need to know who the man in black is. This mysterious. They didn't call him man in black. They called him mysterious stranger. That was the term used for him at the time. I don't think there were men in black movies yet. So, but yeah, that was the number one priority. If I could crack that, I probably was going to get this job. And just kind of in the room, I didn't come in with the specific answer that, you know, we now know who that is. Yeah. But it was funny. I vaguely remember Mr. Akkad saying, you know, my son Malik here had an idea that it would be the guy who heads up the sanitarium. And I just said, oh, you mean Dr. Wynn? And they're like, who's that? So that's where that idea came from.
Yeah. And it, you know, you have that piece, and that piece to me, I think, is fantastic in the sense that if you're looking at this, you know, as somebody who's like trying to make it all make sense, because there's things that clearly don't make sense. Right. Specifically, you know, Michael Myers and Dr. Loomis being blown up at the end of
right. Well, then, yeah, like, you can go back and try to, you know, infuse logic into any of it, and none of it makes sense. I mean, there are things about the original movie that don't make sense. So, I think we've, you know, forgiven those things.
Yeah, and so you try to kind of put it all together as one story, as one
in a way, it was like reverse engineering. You know, I think it was like, you know, and I think the thing that was in my favor at that time was that I did know the minutia, you know, of the films. I could recite the dialogue of every scene of every film and tell you who played what part. And you know, I mean, in fact, it became like a funny like game that Mustafa would play with me. He'd like randomly walk up to me and just like, oh, who played Tommy Doyle in Halloween 1? Like he thought he had a trivia question I couldn't answer, and I would just be like, Brian Andrews. And he'd chuckle with his pipe and try to think of something else to stump me, but he couldn't. So,
there's also the story of, you know, Jamie and her bond with Michael Myers.
Sure.
That I personally, I think it's like if you go that way, you have to. I mean, you're ostensibly creating his new Jamie Lee Curtis, obviously Jamie Lloyd.
Yeah. She was obviously put in as, you know, the next evolution of this endless family tree that for some reason, you know, they kind of got, you know, after 2 and even up until, you know, H2O, I think they were really grappling with, and we were all grappling with this idea of like, how many family members does he have, and why is he killing them? And so, you know, it became, you know, it was John and Deborah that had come up with this, in a way, the myth. You know, they'd laid the foundation by laying things in like Samhain which is really Samhain on the blackboard in Halloween 2. So like all those little weird druidic connections were being hinted at early on, but they definitely dropped it in, you know, 4. They didn't, and 5 even, they didn't hint at any of that stuff, other than the sort of telepathy between, you know, little Jamie and her or Uncle Mike, Michael. So, it was all of these threads, that were sort of hanging out there, and I started to kind of just pull them back, and say, like, let's like connect some of this stuff. And so that's kind of where the story began to evolve and kind of find its rooting in just the pieces that already existed in the series.
And so in your beginning or I should say, in your story, how much of a character is Jamie Lloyd as opposed to what we see on the screen in both versions?
Right. There was a lot more for her in the original script, and I can explain it. Hopefully we have all day. But anyway, what I would want to say, though, just before all of that, is that, when I went in for that meeting, the one where I was kind of sitting there and everybody's looking at me like, well, what's it about? And then the Dr. Wynn thing came up and all of that. And they were really like, when I said, I just uttered the words, well, then Jamie Lloyd, and they're like, no, we're not making a movie about her. We don't know. We got to move on. That character's been played out. We don't want, and I said, but I was, as young as I was and fearful as I was to not get the job, I said, you can't just leave her there. You got to do something with her. You can't just pretend she never existed. And then I said something like, what if it's like Rosemary's Baby?
Hey there. This episode of Creature Features Podcast is being brought to you by Sinister Brew Coffee. Sinister Brew Coffee was started by Mr. Sinister and Lady Gruesome. One was a soldier, one was running haunts in Salem, Massachusetts, and they've come together in their love of all things dark arts, and by dark arts I do mean dark roasts. Sinister Brew Coffee crafts horror-themed blends that awaken the senses, infusing each step with the spirit of darkness. Join in the macabre adventures to savor unique blends and celebrate our sinister pasts. At Sinister Brew Coffee, every sip is a journey into the unknown. You can get your sinister selections at sinisterbrewcoffee.com. Let them know that Chunky sent you, and continue listening with someone you trust.
And the second I said that, it was like Mustafa's eyes kind of lit up, like, oh, okay. So like, and then he understood, because that was a suspenseful movie. I wasn't trying to pitch it like Friday the 13th or, the gore. Like, what he appreciated, I think, was the notion I was pitching the tone of something that was much more psychological and much more terrifying, in a way of like, oh my God, could you imagine if everybody around you was involved in this conspiracy to kidnap my child? So that's really where that whole idea of Jamie being the pregnant teenager in the basement of a hospital, and all of those pieces came together just from those little grains of salt, I would say. So I had to kind of convince them. Once I said that, then they were okay with Jamie returning. That was okay, because I had an idea for her, that it wasn't just another, well, he's going to be chasing her around through the whole movie. And then I had to kind of agree, okay, this is the one where she's got to, and I use the term pass the torch, which means you got to kill her off.
Yeah, of course.
But my idea was, if we have to kill her off, we got to save her for a big juicy scene at the end of the movie where she comes back and she like gets into the fight of all fights with Michael Myers, kind of like what they've done with Jamie Lee in all these more recent movies, where they really give her that like 5 minutes, even if it's just a mano a mano woman against unstoppable force of nature. I just wanted that scene. I just felt like fans deserved it. If you're gonna kill her, you got to give her the real moment of like, she does everything she can, and then the other kind of like button I had to play with it was, she's got this little innocent newborn child, and she'll do whatever she has to protect him. So it was like a mother versus the monster, and I really felt like dramatically we needed to play that, like we owe that. And what I learned was nobody else thought that was a good idea. So we got what you've seen, which is, now she dies in a corn thresher or whatever that thing is in the first 15 minutes. And then, if you'd seen the producer's cut, it was delayed. It was like halfway through the film, she's been like, injured and stabbed, and she's been in a hospital with, bandages around her head, and she's having dreams about her Rosemary's Baby, kind of moment of being bred, groomed. Choose your word. Be careful these days.
Yeah.
And that gets into some other territory
I did want to talk about, is because
But anyway, so she dies in the hospital.
That's an uncomfortable part of the movie.
And I'm like, what's that? So anyway, both of these things were things that I didn't love, because in the script it was, she does go to the hospital. She did get stabbed, so that's how I wanted to put her out of commission. I thought, okay, well, we got to kind of keep her away from this. I don't want to kill her. But so I did a kind of a Halloween 2 thing, like when in 2 where he goes into the hospital room and he stabs the bed a million times and then pulls the sheets back and Jamie Lee's not there. I did exactly that scene, except he did it with the gun. And he fires into the thing and she's not in the bed. And so the whole concept was that she somehow, despite her pain and suffering, she made her way back to the catacombs of Smith's Grove, and she interrupts this kind of creepy ritual that was supposed to happen, saves her child, and they're running again through the same tunnels that she was running through at the beginning of the film, where the nice midwife said, "Here, go this way." And she does the same thing for our new characters, Tommy and Kara and the little boy, and she leads them out. This is where you go. But then she stops and she kind of is ready, and she puts up this like massive fight with the Shape. So it's like, and she gives them the baby, like, take my baby, protect my baby. And she kind of like, by turning around and facing her monster, her uncle, and giving him the fight of her life, it's like she died with a sense of, I don't know, victory in a sense. There was like, he kills her, but he can't kill all of her. The baby's going to survive. So that was the whole notion of not only just returning the character, but really giving her, I felt, the fitting end that she deserved. She's this little girl has been through so much, and then on top of that, she's been held prisoner by a satanic cult for 5 years. So I don't mean to laugh about it, but it's like, you think of the tragedy of this poor young woman, of never having a real life, and she has to go out this way is horrific. But for me, I felt like if we're gonna earn that moment, we gotta earn it. We gotta like make it that she gets that final showdown. But unfortunately, this was the beginning of many things in that film that just didn't register with the powers that be, or they didn't want to pay for it, or they just were like, even with Danielle, who was going to play the part, which was a surprise to many of us. I didn't know she wanted to do it, but she did. And then, it's like the bean counters at the studio. We're just like, well, you're a day player. We're not gonna pay you more than a day rate. So I think she rightly walked from the project. And this is how it turned out. It was just, penny wise, pound foolish. That's what I call it.
Yeah, and it's definitely just, if you have not heard the story of Daniel Harris's dealings with Dimension Films and the production of this movie, go out of your way to look it up. We're not going to dwell on that, but it's fucked up.
No, it's I remember I was on the call with her. I remember it was a speakerphone call where they were like, we were in the prep phase. We're in Salt Lake City about to shoot the movie, and we just thought she was going to be getting on a plane that day, or maybe the next day or something. She'd be coming. And I remember her calling, and I could hear her voice on the speakerphone. I'd never met her in person, so it was kind of cool to hear her voice, saying, guys, and, even back then, I think she was 17, so she had to emancipate herself to just be able to go work, the hours that we needed her to work on this, and without parental supervision or without, a teacher on set, all of that kind of stuff. So she had emancipated herself, which cost her money to do. And, but the thing that kind of stunned me at the time was like the number of F-bombs she dropped. Like, this is fucked up, and I just can't believe they're going to do this, and da-da-da-da. It was just, she was really not happy, and wasn't happy with the production side, like where we were. She was hot. She was furious with the legal side, the studio side. because they were just kind of like, take it or leave it. You're going to get like, a few $1,000s for the show. That's it. And she wasn't asking for a lot. I think it was probably a difference of like maybe $6,000, which she said, well, that'll just at least cover my legal fees because I had to go emancipate myself. And now they don't even want to pay me that much. And I was, I am on the poster of the last movie, so I mean, I got it.
The whole situation's fucked up.
It was a fucked up situation. And, the problem was with that one, it wasn't like 4 and 5 where Mustafa was calling the shots. Those were his companies financing those films. This was a whole other creature. This was this Miramax, which was at the time, a division of Disney, and it just became corporate, and we learned that very quickly. So it was really, really depressing when we found out that she had, not been able to make it work.
If you really look at it, it's, the Akkads versus the Weinsteins in this kind of battle for, power and control of what is ostensibly your vision, and pieces of your vision get taken away from you. How is that? How is that as a creative?
Especially when it's your first time, your passion.
Especially on your first thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd had another film produced in the interim, a small movie, which whatever. It was an experience. It got me my credit, all of that. But it's not the same as something like this. This was really like, reaching that moment of like, this is the one I've been waiting for, like Friday the 13th, the final chapter. This is the one you've been screaming for.
This is the one you fucking called like Babe Ruth at the fucking movie theater.
Totally.
Part 5. Like this is you sitting on that couch as a little boy watching the fucking movie, and this is what's happening to that. And I can't imagine.
I mean, and the Danielle thing was just the beginning of it all. Then it was, people on set that were making all kinds of crazy decisions about, well, we'll just cut this scene and we'll just cut that scene, and we don't really need this and we don't really need that, and anything that I felt like in the script with the moments building the tension and the suspense, like the original film had spent a lot of time. I mean, I think there's probably 20 minutes spent, before he kills Annie in the car in the garage, because he's messing with her. It's like he locks the door's unlocked. There's vapor on the against the glass, and she's like all of these little tricks. And Michael was like kind of a trickster. So all of those little things that I had spent a lot of time trying to concoct and didn't have a lot of time to write the script, but I did my best. But I really had designed a few key sequences, in particular with the grumpy, abusive father who really deserved, what he got, but I just didn't love the way they ended up doing it. But, it was much more of a cat and mouse kind of thing in the script. He didn't just walk in the house and the lights turned off and he walked into the basement. There was a whole thing between him, and he doesn't know Michael's in the house, but we see him, and they're kind of like walking around the house, like he's behind him, then he's not behind him, and then he sits in front of the television, and Halloween 3 is on the television, and he's got his pot pie dinner or whatever from the microwave, and then he goes back to get the thing out of the oven, and then it's not there, and then he goes back in the living room, and somebody's put the pot pie in front of the television, and then they've turned it back to Halloween 3, and then he turns that off and says, "What is this shit?" There was a whole thing, and I was like, wait, and then I saw I wasn't there when they shot that whole bit, and I was like, wait. What happened to everything in between? Why is he just walking into the basement? Well, we ran out of time.
That bit about Halloween 3 is so good.
Oh yeah, that was that. To me,
I love that so much.
That was crucial. You have to acknowledge it somewhere, and I just and put it in the same universe of these movies that Halloween 3 put the original movie.
Exactly.
It's a commercial on television.
I love that, dude.
That was it. And that's so it. That's, I didn't need to have kids running around in silver shamrock masks like they did in the last one. That was cute, but I just thought, you know what? Acknowledge the different universes in which these stories exist. And I thought by putting it as a commercial on television, a coming up kind of thing for the horror-thon, and that, and I love that Michael Myers just kind of keeps putting, like, it's in his snarky, childlike way, he keeps turning it back to that. Like, here, watch this.
So, I love that.
Those
so
were
good.
the moments that I just felt like I was so, gut punched when they just didn't shoot it. So, when they say the producer's cut, I'm like, that's great, but that's not what was in the script. Like none of these things ever got it to, were made it to camera at all. So, for me, when I see or hear about producer's cut, I'm like, well, okay, but that wasn't very good either.
Yeah. And so obviously you being a fan of the Halloween franchise, because you're a fan before you wrote this story, can you look at this film, because so much of it has been changed from what you intended it to be, and can you look at it and distance yourself from the production, or are you incapable of?
I mean, listen, it's been almost 30 years. I mean, it's just, first of all, I want to say thank you, because the fact that you remember this film at all, and that my name is, connected to it in any way, it's just like amazing to me. So on that level, it's just like, I couldn't be more grateful, and I couldn't be more grateful for the experience, and I couldn't be more grateful to Mr. Akkad and certainly his son Malik, who we've remained good friends over the years. It opened up all kinds of doors for me that wouldn't have been open had I not had that experience or that credit. So in that sense, I revere that film, because it really, really gave me a start in the business that I don't think, had I not gotten it, I would have had. So for those reasons, I love the movie. For a lot of other artistic reasons, or it's hard to watch. It's even after all this time, I can have fun with it now. Like, it'll just be on like the Fear Fest or whatever, and I can just kind of like have fun with the movie. But it's just like silliness to me. Yeah. It's not. I don't take it as that punch as it was. I know what the movie is. I know what I'm gonna see.
When you look at it,
yeah. Oh, I think I lost you.
When you look at it.
Oh shoot!
I got you. I mean,
oh, there you are. You froze up for a second there. Sorry about that.
Okay. It's all good. It's got to be a thing. Like, as you're watching it, and this is just again my assumption, as like a Halloween fan, and just seeing it through the lens of, if you were watching this in the theater. And you were to see this movie, knowing nothing about the production, knowing nothing about anything that came along with it.
Right.
Are there things in there that you still enjoy?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
To me, the most interesting.
I don't have the experience that you guys did of like, being a young person and seeing this thing come up on screen and all of that. Like, from, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh God, I can't believe they're releasing this.
I have to imagine you dreading it because of your.
I knew, and I was saying to everyone at the time,
memory of the process.
This is a hot mess. Like, what are you thinking? What were you thinking? And I became unpopular for that opinion. Like, they didn't want to hear that. They want. The Hollywood is a weird. You learn, like, everything has to be yes. It's agree. You kind of live in this little bubble of people who are just patting you on the back instead of telling you the truth. So I was the person going, this is not right, guys. This is not, that mask is not right. This cinematography is not right. That music is not right. I'm being like, I was like the QC annoying. I won't call myself the boss, but I think of anyone, I probably felt like the boss, because I was so like on everybody's ass. Like, this is, And at the other side of the spectrum, having no control. Anything I said was shrugged at.
Yeah.
I wasn't the director. I wasn't the producer. I wasn't the studio. I was just, and literally, these are three words that I've come to learn to live by. You're just the writer, and that's how you are looked at. Once you give that thing over to them, it's not yours anymore. So it's painful just because of how much it meant to me at the time. I think it was, as I've described in great detail here, like, it was really, the thing that meant the most to me. And I think it was just, it's kind of like the summation of everything I had done before, as just to get to that point. And to be given that chance, and then to see it all kind of being dismantled by people who didn't care as much or didn't have that emotional investment that I did. I think that was the part that made me dislike it all. I mean, I think it just took me the time, to kind of come to that place of like acceptance. There's like those stages of grief. So I was upset, to say the least. I was really upset because I was the one going, this is not right. And this is a big mistake. And so I just remember, and I don't want to vilify Joe Chappelle any more than he's been vilified over the years. I don't think it's fair, because I think he was also very young and very much at the mercy of, the studio. He had to kind of do what was being said to him, and he didn't really. The problem I think with Joe is he just didn't have the gumption, if you will, to fight for it. I think he kind of knew what we were going for, but at the end of the day, if they said, "Well, we're cutting that scene," he never said, "No, we're not cutting that scene because this is my film and we're going to do it." He never took that position. He just kind of went with.
He never stood up for the importance of a particular shot.
Right. And that was my frustration with him. Not that I didn't like him as a human being. He's a very, very nice person. And I think, honestly, it's a talented director. I think there's some stuff in Halloween 6 that looks better than any of the movies, even the more recent ones, to be honest. I think there's some moments in that are more effective and done for a fraction of the budget.
It definitely hits some of the Cundy takes that
a little bit. It's its own thing, and then they got into that crazy, like, stupid editing with all this kind of MTV 90s kind of vibe. It's so silly to me, and it certainly is dated now when you look at it. But I think there's some brilliant little moments in that film that I love. I love the thing with like Mrs. Blankenship, and she's telling the story of the origins of Halloween, and we're juxtaposing all of that with Tommy Doyle at the town fair and the fires and the revelry that's going on around the celebration. And all of that stuff I thought was great. Not exactly the way I mentioned it in my head, but really cool, and it works. The scene in the window, the kind of, I call it the rear window moment of the movie, where she's seeing her friend in the window and like, he's in the house, he's right behind you. All of that is just great, effective, and I think it's like, if I were a fan in the audience seeing that, I think my heart would have leapt into my throat in that scene. Just something about it is so quintessentially Halloween that I feel like of any scene in that film that just captures it. It's like right there. So those little things that I think we got. I just feel like the overall picture, and especially because we're telling a much more complicated story, it just needed to be handled very carefully. And I think, did we need more time with the script? We did. Did we need more time with, prep in this film? We did. It wasn't rushed. Yes, it was. But that being said, I also felt like we had the opportunity to go back and fix some of that stuff we were given 5 days of pickup shots. And instead of going back and augmenting what we had and adding in the suspenseful bits that didn't make it the first time and kind of like fine tuning the thing, they just went and scrapped everything and said, well, fuck that. We'll just come up with a whole new ending, which I didn't even have a hand in writing. I wrote some version of it, and I think that got thrown in the trash. And then they hired another writer who never got credited to do his version, which was really outlandish. It had like the voice of God coming in at one point, as I remember. Like literally, you would hear like a thunderous voice of the god Thorn. So, it was literally reading like a comic book. It was a little silly, but yeah. So you just start to realize like all of these people are having a hand, and it's like chum in the water. They're all taking a little bite out of it, So it just was tough. It was tough.
So this is my last question for you, okay. And I want to just kind of like let you rock this one, because I know that there has to be one specific scene that didn't even make it to shooting that felt to you in your story to be quintessential Halloween. And I just want you to tell whatever that piece is right now, if you could.
I don't know if there's a scene or a shot or a moment. I mean, I feel like the script was so chock full of references and Easter eggs and little winks and nods. And I feel like the movie has some of it, like naming the parents John and Deborah, and
yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if you know this one. I think some Uber fans have picked up on the stomach pounder that he makes the little kid for breakfast, which comes right out of The Fog. So there was this real love letter to John Carpenter and Deborah. And like, it was, for me, it was my way of saying thank you to them, even though they weren't involved, but just to really like acknowledge their impact on me. So
yeah, no, they wanted to send them to space.
In a sense, I feel like I did get to do that. I just wish it had been done in a more complete and final way, where I could say like, okay, if the movie sucks, at least it's like, all right, they're basing it on the full vision, but they're not, they're not seeing the full vision, they're seeing half of it. So that's the difficult part. But like I mentioned, like that scene that I call it the rear window scene, and Kara Strode is like talking to her friend on the phone and like get out of the house, all of that kind of, and then he's in the window. All those, that moment for me, just like, at least I got that, like that, that worked. I just love the way like the camera follows her across the street, and and the kids walk into the house, and it's just it's like the original movie but sped up. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's not that milked suspense, because you couldn't really get away with that again. But it's just that heart pounding moment that I felt was really effective. So there was a moment in that didn't make it into the film, which was when she's looking through that camera into the window across the way, and the girl her friend's been stabbed to death. Yeah. But there was supposed to be a moment where Michael Myers literally looks out the window as if he's looking right into the camera and like looking at her, and then he reaches up, because Michael would do this sort of thing. He reaches up and he pulls the shade down.
Oh,
and that's like that. He's like, and it's kind of like, come on over, bitch, I'm waiting.
Yeah, no, that's fucking great. So that reminds me of the scene in Friday the 13th Part 3 at the. Was that?
But in his mind, he's like, "Come on over. We got some business to take care of here."
Dude, I love that. I love that idea. It feels inherently Michael Myers, and just like looking right at her.
Yeah.
And
like,
again, it reminds me of the scene.
Her, like, come on, bring it. Like that kind of moment where he's being like very like, now I'm in your face. Now you can come and get me. So that, I just thought that was more exciting for whatever reason they do it that way. So, listen, it's just one of those things where you learn, and I say this to all young and aspiring writers and even directors is, when you're working in a system of, that's kind of got a hierarchy to it, especially like studios, you learn very quickly that, your vision is not really your vision. It's a whole bunch of people throwing, it's a stupid analogy, but like, you're trying to get the plane off the runway and it's trying to get it to, get into the air. And then what you realize is like, oh, they're throwing like baggage all over the runway so that you can't actually, have the plane take off. That's like a stupid way of looking at it, but like, it kind of is. You just have all these like stupid people dropping things on the runway so that you can't take off. So that's, a very simplistic kind of lame way of explaining it, but it kind of is that.
So we're coming up on the 30-year anniversary. It's going to be next year, the 30th anniversary of Halloween 6. And also them stepping away from the Halloween, and there's been talks about this television show. Is there any interest with you to returning to the franchise in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, listen, I would do something that made sense for me to do. Malik, as I mentioned to you, Malik Akkad and I have remained pretty good buddies over the years, and I've always, he's always kind of, even though I haven't been necessarily involved in it, he's always kind of opened things up to me. Like I often will know kind of like what's going on set with this one, or who they're thinking about hiring. Like he kind of treats me like I'm part of the family, and that's a really nice thing. He doesn't have to do that, but I think he felt, and I think part of it is because his dad, like he's like, you knew my father, and none of these people. Yeah. Like people who've come since. So I think he just feels like there's a sense of family there, like the sense of like, I don't know, just it's I think it's a nod of respect for his dad, and I think the fact that he saw something in me, and then Malik and I did get along so well. So that's just, even though we don't see each other a whole lot anymore, we've kept in touch. So if there was an opportunity there, I think, to do something, and I think if we both saw like, oh, this would be cool, and it would make sense for me to do it because we'll revisit, I don't know, this piece of the story or something like that, or something entirely new. I mean, I'm definitely open to it. There's nothing that, right now that I've heard of that it's, seems like it's the right fit, but you just never know. I mean, it's so funny to me how so many of these franchises over the years, like they kind of like they harken back to earlier pieces of story, so there might be some version of it where they, maybe they're going to want to tap into the Thorn again, or into the Kara Strode character, or and find out what happened to somebody. If they ever did that, I'd be like, sure, let's do it. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I'd love to see Danny older.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Kara, and they're wandering, and he's still sort of afflicted by his interactions with
Demons,
Thorn.
Voices,
sort of like
close to her grandmother at this point. So
Friday 5.
I would imagine she's like the professor of like, of mythology. Like she teaches like mythology and Greek myth and all of this stuff at like the local college. I think she's just a professor. That's what I think she is now. She's, she's got the glasses, and she's a little more careworn, but sort of brilliant, but a little bit withdrawn. She's had this experience, and so she believes like, these aren't just myths; these monsters are real. I think that would be a fun way to have her character return, as just this kind of
especially raising Steven,
professor,
right?
Kind of thing, because she's so. I just imagine her being really smart, and thankfully we cast a young, very intelligent actress named Marianne Hagen, who had graduated from an Ivy League university, and she brought an intelligence to it all.
And I mean, of course, raising Steven, that whole story still is there. That is the connection to Michael Myers. Like there's a lot that you could explore with that, and I mean, there is. I don't know. There's an appetite
for it. Like you said, this is a divisive film in many ways.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
That being said, I think if we came up with like a clever way, I'll bet you even some of those people could be won over. I bet you there's still a bit of affection just because it's one that was early on. It was certainly Paul Rudd's very first film credit at the time, although he technically had Clueless, which came out a couple months before our movie, but he had shot our movie first.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, listen, it would all be fun to do some sort of reunion kind of piece or whatever, or even if it was a non-Halloween movie and we just got our team back together. Because I have to say, like, it doesn't happen all the time, but I would say like the cast and even some of the crew of that movie have really stayed like close with each other over the years. Like J.C. Brandy, who played Jamie in the film, and she and Danielle Harris are very good friends in real life. So, all of the kind of people that I feel like I just, on a personal level, I got to know, and we all kind of like, we're so young, we were all just so glad to be there and be a part of this thing in the freezing cold weather of Salt Lake City in 1990, in the winter of 1994, or fall. And
brilliant idea, you guys.
we just all kind of bonded because you have to, like you're the young ones, and we were in a way like the rookies and the rebels. So like any little subversive thing we could think of to like stick it to them, we would do it. So like you just, because you're kids, like we were all in our early 20s. So, you're thrilled to be there, but you're also kind of still have that little sense of like, fuck the system and fuck these people. It's that sort of time of life. So, in that sense, we've all kind of like obviously matured, grown up, but sort of stuck together. We all know what it was and what it was meant to be, and I think we all just, we love the experience of just being together. So that's what I take away from that.
Well, I appreciate you for giving your time and being as giving in terms of, just going along with me, because I know that I kind of probably threw you off with how I started everything.
Sometimes I just know what I'm going to say, and not that these are canned responses, but there's so much to the story, and I have to, once I get on a road, I have to kind of keep going down the road. So I'm sorry if I just kind of kept meandering your questions.
No. The story is why we were here. That story itself is, to me, one of the most fascinating stories in this franchise specifically, just because you look at you and you specifically, you are this fan of the franchise who's getting to do what every fan has always wanted to do,
right?
And you're getting to tell your Halloween story.
Yep.
And the curse of Michael Myers really is a curse, because
there's that.
Everything that could go wrong kind of does go wrong.
Well, there's a funny story with the title, and I don't know if you have time to sort of just entertain me for a second. Listen to but I remember where that title came from, because I know a lot of fans are like, oh, it's called The Origin, and it never really was. There was some version of like a trailer that came out that, again, that was the studio just doing things that they felt like doing because we're the studio. Like, we had no part in that trailer or even that title, so they just kind of went off on their own and made that. Anyhow, but I remember sitting in the production office one morning, because this is the crazy thing. Like I'm the writer of the movie, and I'm on set. I'm in the same hotel with everyone else, and I literally had been doing rewrites all night in my room, and I was still in pajamas, but they wouldn't get me a printer, like for my own room. Like, they wouldn't give me one. So I'd have to come down to the office, and I'd have to like unhook the printer from this is the days before Wi-Fi and all of that. So I had to like unhook the printer from the accountant's computer and connect it, by whatever those things were, to my little laptop, like a DOS laptop, and with Windows 95. And I don't even know if we were there yet. I don't think we had Windows 95. It was pre that, XP or something. So I'm printing out these new pages and like half asleep. And in the corner of the room, they have like a television set up with a group of people around it, like crew guys. And they're looking at like last night's work, which was, the dailies. And the scene was the bit where the disc jockey is found, with his body in a tree, and Paul Rudd's standing there, and there's a kid, and I literally was like, I'm looking at this like, through my bleary eyes of like having had no sleep, and I'm literally looking at this. I'm like, what is that? And they're like, well, that's the scene. I'm like, that's not the scene. Like, where's all the kids? What's happening? Like, what is this? I said, this is a test shot, right? This is just test footage. And they're like, no. Like all pissed off. Like, I said, well, and then innocent and lovely as he always was, Mustafa Akkad comes ambling into the office, just like, hello, everyone, having no idea what he's going to do with his little pipe, and it's like 7 a.m, and he's just there with his suit, and just friendly as could be. How's everybody doing this morning? I said, well, and he's like, well, then he turns to me, like, as pages are coming out of the printer, and getting jammed, and he's like, well, what should we call this movie? Because we need another title. We can't just call it Halloween 6. I said, well, at this point, from everything I've seen, you should call it The Curse of Michael Myers. And he's like, oh, I like that. But he didn't understand why I said that.
I was joking, Mustafa. This production is cursed.
He was like he just was like your I don't know, like your uncle, you know what I mean? Like he was like Uncle Musti. Yeah. But that's amazing. But he just didn't get it. Like he just thought it was a good title. He had no idea that I was like, raging at that moment. I was so angry.
Him just with his pipe, not a care in the world. Yeah, no, I like it. Print it. Make it
I like this. Yeah. And so it stuck. There's a story. There's a little, and again, like, there's little subversive moments in that movie. I would say, like, there's like the thing with it's like the power of the pen was the only thing that I had to fight back with. And so I use it in any way I could. Like when I had to rewrite the scene of like the radio shock jock walking across the parking lot and he's pissed off and screaming into a funky looking flip phone, and he's saying things like, "We should have taken this show to the real Myers house, or we should have done it in the first place." Well, that's me going, "Why are we not making this movie in Pasadena or South Pasadena?" Yeah. That's like me talking to the audience, or me. He was me on that movie. That was my he was my voice of like anger and revenge. No, it wasn't revenge. But just that he was constantly like a blowhard and just like, and I'm sure that's how people saw me. It's like I'm always just complaining about something. But I'm like, just do it right. Yeah. So from the Mask to the House to the Jamie Lloyd to the on and on and on and I mean, it just went down the line of like the injustices I felt like, and then it's funny to me every time I see one of the new David Gordon Greens and all that. It's like, oh, they had the money to build the house this time. Okay, I got it. Yeah. I got it.
Oh, they're bringing Tommy back. Huh?
Bring Tommy back. Okay, I got it.
I wonder where they got that from.
It's all good now, guys. All this
we get Lindsay too, huh? Oh, yep. Wow.
Yep, there's that. All the things that we talked about, but didn't, yeah. So it's just, in a way, like each time another one comes out, it's a little bit of another slap going like, oh, God. I mean, maybe it's, I don't know the
David Gordon Green is sitting there dejected, not knowing
then he got
do, and Malik just walks up with your Bible and just slides it over to him.
Oh, probably. Who knows? Maybe it's still there.
Like, hey guys, I've had this for a while. Some of this.
Here's something that'll maybe give you some reference. I don't know. I'm sure he's a very nice guy. I mean, maybe I'll meet him sometime and we'll have a drink and laugh about our struggles. But yeah. I mean, I don't look back on it now as anything but just kind of, I don't know. There's like a sardonic kind of, maybe it's the way Mustafa would look at things. Maybe when he passed, like maybe he passed something on to me, which was like, don't take it all so seriously. It's going to be okay. So, and not that I don't care. It's just that I think there's a moment where you just kind of go, okay, this is the way it is. It's, you go through those stages of grief, as I mentioned. So anyway, that's my spiel.
I appreciate it. And I want to just give you the opportunity to let people know where they can find you in the world of social media, should they be so inclined. I
mean, so easy. I mean, literally, I'm not a big social media person necessarily. I don't post things all the time, but I do, when Halloween things come up, or I find old photos or whatever, I'll put them up. But I'm just Daniel Farrands on Facebook. That's honestly the easiest way. And even the same on Instagram. So either one of those, you can find me. Just type my name in.
Perfect. And if you guys are here just because Daniel Farrands, I do not blame you, but you've enjoyed the conversation. You want to find out more about us, you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can start by liking us on Facebook, facebook.com/CreaturePod, by following us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, YouTube, all at CreaturePod. Just all of the social medias, it's at CreaturePod. It's really, really easy to do. I thank you, Daniel, for being as kind and giving with your time as you've been.
It's always a thrill to meet.
Literally,
love the series and love the character and care enough at this point to even think about there was that one all those years ago. It's just, to me, I'm amazed that people remember.
So this one is like one of those movies that I saw. This was really early of line, and you could go to a library and you could go online and you can get information and stuff on. I did all of that with this movie because I was like, understand and I. This is gonna sound really dumb. I did all of that But I did not know that Donald Pleasant passed away, and so I didn't know until I saw the end of the movie that he had passed away.
I know.
And so this movie is special to me because, again, it's my first time seeing a Halloween film in the theaters, and you know, as horror fans, we look at these experiences as kind of like, you know, my very first concert,
it's like
or something like that.
You know, like
exactly.
Like Halloween,
and so
for me, and certainly like Friday the 13th 2 and 3 and 4, like all of those that I got to see as a young person, and they really make, you know, such an impression if you're drawn to the genre for whatever varied reasons we're drawn to it. But I think it's you know, a lot of it is just about, I think, this word is overused all the time today, but it is sort of an empowering thing. You know, I think you see yourself, you know, through some of these characters, and whether they live or die, you know, I think it's part of that fun is like confronting and you know, and especially like, you know, you have like the Kara Strodes and the Laurie Strodes and the whole Strode family, but you know, they all fight back, and they have to combat adversity in a way that, you know, we sometimes think like we're doing that every day in our lives, you know. So I think it's just it's a metaphor in a sense, and I think it's a very powerful one. So if our movie touched on that just the slightest bit, I'm proud.
Again, this has been a cool conversation with me. I would love to talk to you again about Crystal Lake Memories and the Nightmare on Elm Street documentary. Like, you're a fascinating dude, and I think that you're cool as shit. So
you too, very much so.
Again, thank you very much for being on the show. That's gonna do it for us, you guys. So for Daniel Farrands and for myself, again, my name is Junkie. This has been another episode of the Creature Features podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube, listen with someone you trust.